That third round was something to behold. Ortega comes in with a left-hand entry and knocks Volkanovski to the ground. From here, Ortega snatches up a guillotine, and just in this landing, I want to know, he lands above the arm, as opposed to just settling for a standard mount and then just trying to squeeze arbitrarily for a guillotine and squeeze on his head. He ends up stepping over the shoulder. This opens up options for you when you start grappling. The moment you step over that shoulder, if his head happens to pop out, he can convert to a triangle if need be. He can also get a little bit more leverage by being that high on the head while simultaneously having a very tight grip on the guillotine. At this point, it's too early to tell, although we know what happens very shortly. But just in terms of like the moment you settle in and get your hands clasped together, it's very, very hard to tell in the moment whether you have it or not. The next thing I want to point out is Volkanovski's reaction to the guillotine. It looks like he's kind of struggling, but he's actually doing a lot of things here. And normally most people focus on one defense or two defenses. Volkanovski's doing three things simultaneously in order to alleviate the pressure on this guillotine. And that's what's the most impressive part about this escape for me. Volkanovski has gone on the record to say that in his head, he was in "I'm about to lose my belt" territory. So it goes without saying that credit to Brian Ortega, it was that deep. But first off, he's shaking off his legs. He's making sure Ortega can't actually wrap up his lower body so that he gets more leverage to crank on his neck. He's constantly bucking, shucking, and doing whatever he can to alleviate lower body control. On top of that, he's using his right hand and he's constantly pushing on Ortega's hip. So simultaneously, while bumping and shucking, he's pushing the hip down, okay? So these two details are already going to do a lot to alleviate the pressure of the guillotine, but the fact of the matter is it's still that deep. What's the third thing he's doing simultaneously? Most people commit two hands to the hip bump, right? They'll put all their mental resources into fighting off the hips and fighting off the legs. Volkanovski's doing three things. His left hand is actually not on the hips. It's occupying Ortega's other arm, so the guillotine can't get tighter. But it's that close he was considering tapping. So he's doing all three of these things under the pressure, and I thought that composure is really, really critical here. You'll see pictures scattered all over the internet about how close that was, and you can see his face the moment Ortega lets go. He's absolutely relieved. But this is just a really, really impressive defensive struggle. It's very hard to stay composed when there's that much pressure and a man of Brian Ortega's submission skill squeezing on your neck. That's a scary place to be, and credit. I always love seeing good defense. Lo and behold, Volkanovski switches to half guard and immediately starts working for a single leg takedown. The single leg is really useful because it's not necessarily just a takedown tool. You can get a single leg from a lot of places so long as you maintain the underhook, and this is something that Volkanovski actually manages to do here. Here's the thing though, there's a bit of a race that occurs during this moment. While Volkanovski is working for the half guard single, Ortega setting up a Darce choke. So this becomes a game of who can get to their position first. Can Ortega lock up a vice grip, or can Volkanovski get up to his knees? And you'll see that Volkanovski gets to his knees first, and as a result, he gets the sweep. Because Volkanovski wins this scramble, he ends up being able to land a barrage of ground and pound that further bloodies Brian Ortega's face. The final moment of Brian Ortega's offense is from close guard, and this is really impressive. Doing a basic triangle is pretty standard. I think what's most impressive about this chain of submissions is that Ortega hasn't mentally broke yet. He's still firing on all cylinders in terms of throwing up submission attempts, keeping on the offense even though he's on his back. He's still offensively minded despite taking damage. The other thing I'm really impressed about is he's taking a fundamental move, but he timed it perfectly. When guys throw ground and pound, that's actually usually a really good time to throw up subs. Usually this is when they're not staying close to you, they're not trying to shut you down, they're taking risks to inflict damage. When you take risks, there's usually better opportunity to throw offense off of your back. When Volkanovski throws with this much heat into his ground and pound, Ortega takes that opportunity to use his wrist control, and he's not overselling it. He's not grabbing or holding onto it, revealing his intentions. He literally touches it, guides it away, and throws up that triangle almost immediately. And that triangle is tight. He threatens it for a brief second, but then once he grabs his shin, he actually locks it over his shin. This is huge because this is usually game over. He even hooks the leg on the right side and he gets the appropriate angle. It's hard to say what really happened in the moment. When you're this gassed and you're in the third round of a title fight, for all we know, Ortega's legs were already kind of half gone. And while he did get a squeeze and Volkanovski looks like he's hanging on for his dear life, my interpretation of this moment was that when Volkanovski fell on his back, Brian Ortega got indecisive about whether he wanted to stay up on top and mount or whether he was going to try to finish it off his back. And because of that, you should see the triangle gets a little looser, and then all of a sudden Volkanovski scrambles and he's out of the triangle, even though it was very close. If you hold on to that triangle for your dear life, your legs will gas out. The other thing I want to note here is that if you choose to stay up on mount, it's not necessarily dangerous, but you need to commit to it, and he seemed to be half in, half out. I don't want to harp on mistakes. It's more about the fact that, no, look, there's a lot of things going on. He's tired. Something slipped up. And honestly, Volkanovski is a savage for even surviving this chain of submissions. This would be very, very scary to deal with, especially if the first one was that tight. At this point, we've gone for 3 submission attempts. Where do you go from here? Part of the reason this fight really spoke out to me was because this is a really good example of where BeGrapple can go really wrong. I always appreciate seeing very, very well executed submissions, but even here, there's sometimes you meet people that will not tap, they'll let things break. If you need to finish a submission under the heat of the moment, it takes quite a bit of mental and physical resources to actually pull it off. In the heat of the moment, things aren't always going to be technical, things aren't always going to be tight. In these situations, sometimes, like, it could be argued that after he lost the guillotine in the first moment, he could have abandoned ship earlier, saved his arms from burning out to win the round or bring some momentum back in his direction, as opposed to throwing the kitchen sink in the next 2 submission attempts and then being left scratching your head thinking, oh shoot, why can't I submit this guy? So this is a fantastic fight. I look forward to seeing both of these men and where they go in the featherweight division, but goddamn, what a banger fight. Thanks so much for watching.